Shalom, and welcome back, everyone. I hope everyone had a good weekend. Last week, we lost a giant, a man who was an incredible human being, someone who was world renowned, probably one of the greatest rabbis of our day. This is Rabbi Chaim Kanevsky, who lived in Bnei Brak. Years ago, when I was a young kid, when I was a child, I studied Torah and I knew about great rabbis who lived. I had studied some Talmud, and I learned about Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and I learned about Moses and Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, and all of the great sages and holy people of the past. But growing up in Toronto in the 1950s and 1960s, there weren't too many of these Gedolim. There weren't too many of these holy, great, sage rabbis around. In fact, I didn't know of any of them. I had only heard of them or read about them until I came to Crown Heights. And when I came to Crown Heights, I saw the Rebbe. And the Rebbe was a remarkable human being, as everyone knows. He was someone who had tremendous depth of learning, great study, and a tremendous knowledge of people. And he was a sage. And this is something that impressed me very, very much because I never thought such sages existed anymore. And as time went on, I met more of them and I heard of more of them and I saw more of them. Well, Rabbi Kanevsky was one of them. He was a remarkable person, probably from a different era. He had two sides to him. One side was Torah. He was an incredible student of Torah, a genius. He had a photographic memory. Each year, he would study and finish the entire Tanakh, the Bible, from beginning to end, from Bereshis all the way straight through to Divrei Hayomim, to the Book of Chronicles, with commentaries. He studied the entire Mishnah, the entire Gemara, the whole Talmud, from cover to cover, which was an incredible accomplishment. He also studied all the books of the Rambam, Maimonides, the books of the Shulchan Aruch, the codes of Jewish law, and he accomplished all of these things, the breadth of Torah study each and every year. It was a remarkable, remarkable accomplishment. And he had authored many books and commentaries of Torah. And interestingly, he never held any formal position in the Jewish community, none whatsoever. He was simply a student and he studied and he was supported by his family and by some people. He lived very Spartanly in a small apartment in Bnei Brak in Israel. He came to Israel in 1928 as a young boy of 5 years old, and he lived his whole life in Israel. And he lived a very, very simple, plain existence because his whole world was Torah. As Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai would say, Toraso umnoso. His Torah was his livelihood. And indeed it was. And this is what he studied. But he had another side to him, as many of the great sages of Israel had a second side as well. And that was community. He was very, very much sought after by everyone, religious, non-religious, Hasidim, Charedim, Misnagdim, everyone, for advice. And his advice was incredible. And his insights were incredible. There were literally lines around the block from his house, waiting to hear him and to ask him for advice. Political leaders in Israel would seek out his sage advice as well. And he became involved with matters of state as well in Israel. And many of the leaders of Israel mourned his passing as well. He was well into his 90s when he passed away. How he was able to accomplish all of these things, whether studying Torah so much and spending time with Tzarchit Tzibur, as they say, with matters of the community, is very, very hard to believe that a person would have such time to be able to do everything. Was incredible. The Rebbe was like that also. He completely was involved with Torah study all the time, as well as his involvement in the community. Well, I don't know if there are any more Chaim Kanevskys around today. I don't know. There probably are. Our sages tell us that in every single generation, b'chol dor v'dor, in every single generation, is pashtush l'demoisha, there is a spreading out of Moses in every generation. There is a Moses in every generation, and perhaps there's a Moses today as well. I hope there is to come up and to give us the guidance that we need so badly. Luckily, we have Reb Chaim's works, we have the Rebbe's works, we have the works of so many of the great rabbis to consult with and to look into. People very often look at their letters that the Rebbe would send to people, and they consult those letters to this day for advice. Well, it's a sad time for the Jewish people, but perhaps this is the time that we're waiting for the Mashiach to come. And perhaps this is the last moments for Mashiach to come when all the greats are no longer with us as they were in the past. Perhaps now the only great left, the great one left to come and to reveal himself is the Mashiach himself. We should hope and pray that that's it. And meanwhile, the neshama of Reb Chaim Kanevsky should have a holy place in Gan Eden, and he should be looking down at all of us and praying for our welfare and our happiness and our goodness as well. May this happen speedily in our day. Shalom.